Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this video, I'm going to quickly show you through SQL the concept of blocking and what is blocking. So let's quickly reiterate what is blocking. Blocking occurs when one session has a lock on an object and thus causes another session to wait in a holding queue until the current session is entirely done with the resource. Let's look at that as a diagram. So if I go over here, this is an example of blocking. You'll see that we have a table called Table 1, and in that there's a first name Tom with the ID 1. So this is a table. Transaction 1 comes first, and what transaction 1 wants to do is update Tom to Mary using the update statements. So since he wants to do that, he puts in a lock. This is the X lock. X is the exclusive lock. He puts an exclusive lock on Table 1, and that says, hey, I'm going to take control of this row, and no one can access this row until I'm finished with my transaction. Thus, gets an exclusive lock so that while it's updating, no other transaction can modify the Table 1. So now transaction 1 has put a exclusive lock on this. At the same time, transaction number 2 comes along and wants to update that table at the same time. So at the same time, transaction 2 is trying to update the table 1, but it can't because table 1 has put an exclusive lock on it, and this will not execute until this is released. So we're going to show you that in a second, and this is an example of blocking. Transaction 1 wants to do something to table 1, puts a lock on it. At the same time, transaction 2 tries to do something to that table 1, which is an update, and it prevents it, and this causes blocking. So let's look at that in SQL. Before I even give you the demonstration, I'm going to set up what's called a trace. Basically, you don't really need to follow this if you don't wish, but basically the DBCC trace status command for this trace number is trying to determine if I can record in my, in my SQL Server logs. I want to log the blocking. So in order for me to log it in this particular environment, I have to have this trace turned on, and the trace for the recording is 1222. So to turn it on, you say DBCC trace on, followed by the number, and -1. As soon as I execute this, and now if I look at the status, you'll see the status is 1, and global means that I can use it everywhere, basically. So don't worry about this too much, but it is important to understand. So I'm going to now highlight that and check it. So let me continue. So the first thing I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to just drop a couple of tables that I'll be working with so we can start fresh. And there we go. Okay, so that's not being created. So I'm going to use SQL2. And what I want you to do now is just highlight this entire thing. And basically, this will create 2 tables, Table 1, Table 2, and it will insert a single record of Tom in Table 1 and Susan in Table 2. And then it'll give you the select statement. So if you execute that, it'll come through. So that's easy also. So now if I look at the status of the locks, I can go to SP-Who2 and execute. At this time, there are no locks because I have not run any transactions. One of the key things you're looking for when you run the execute who2 is this column, and this stands for blocked by. As I mentioned, there's nothing occurring, there's no blocking occurring. So if your users are complaining, this is certainly a quick way to look at it to see if, which SPID is causing a block. SPID stands for Server Processor ID, and this is the number. Don't get confused with this number. Sometimes I do myself. So this is under SPID column. And these are the processes that are working in the background with their appropriate SPID numbers. And as I said, this is the column that's going to show you what blocking is occurring. Take a note right now that I'm 55 right now here. So this is a great way of quickly looking at blocking if there is occurring. This is what I do immediately if I detect or someone tells me it's taking it too long. I'll just run this before doing anything else. Just run this, execute, and see if there's anything being blocked. So now that we don't know there's no blocking occurring, so let's create a block. So I'm going to create a block from scratch here. So now, here we go. So you'll notice here that obviously I have a first name called Tom. And what I'm going to do now is, update this statement using the update statement, and I want to change Tom to Mary. One thing you'll note is that I'm using the keyword begin tran. What that means is I'm beginning this transaction, but at the same time, I'm not completing it, because in order for me to complete this transaction, I have to actually commit the transaction. So what that means is when I execute this with the begin tran, the update statement will occur, but the transaction is still open. And that's an important concept to understand. So as soon as I execute this, it's affected here. Let's see if it updated to Mary, and it did. But remember, I have not committed the transaction. If I wanted to roll back that transaction because I've not committed it, I can with the rollback command. So if I execute that, and now if I look at this, it'll be Tom again. Because it was not committed, I can roll back the transaction. So now I'm going to do it again. Begin transaction, update table 1, change Tom to Mary, and it's not being committed. Had I used this along with the commit transaction, then it would have been committed. So now I'm going to execute and see it's Mary. So now we're going to simulate a, so let's look at the SP2 who. Are there being any blocks? Nope, not all. So let's create a block right now. So what I want you to do now is copy this and open it in a new query. And on the next query, right click and go vertical so we can see it next to each other. And I want you to paste this here and then uncomment it. Now, what this is representing is a separate transaction. This is the first transaction. Let me go back here. This is the first transaction. This is this transaction. And what this transaction is doing, it captured table 1 and it updated to Mary, but it did not commit. Therefore, it's an open transaction, and it placed an X lock on it, an exclusive lock. So now what happens is transaction 2 is going to come along and try to update that table and update that name to a different name, to Randolph. So let's see if it can do that. So this is session 1 or transaction 1. This is session 2 or transaction 2. And remember, again, this has not been committed even though it's updated. So now I'm going to execute this, and look what happens. It does not execute. Remember, this SPID number is 56. So this update is being held or being blocked by this, because this did not close the transaction. It did not commit the transaction. So we can look at that now and do an SP-who2 and execute. And now you'll see we've got blocked. So this says block number 55, which is this, is blocking this 56, which is this. And this will continue. This blocking will continue endlessly until this transaction completes. So now I'm going to complete this transaction. Let me just so as soon as I complete this transaction, watch what happens here. This row immediately updates. Now let's look at the thing, and it should be, if everything works out, it should be Randolph, and it is. So that's an example, a simple example of what a blocking is. A blocking is when one transaction has not committed an update, and another transaction tries to, at the same time, tries to update that same table simultaneously, and you'll have blocking because this has not committed itself. As soon as this commits itself, this transaction is allowed to do it. So remember, the bottom line is only one transaction can update a statement on a table one at a time. They cannot do it simultaneously, instantaneously, because then you have corrupt data. So that's the purpose of blocking. Now you have illustrated how easy it is to view the blocking. The next thing I'm going to show you is what a deadlock is. In this particular case, I was able to commit this transaction and this completed. In the next one, when we talk about deadlocking, it will never cease again until SQL intervenes, and we'll show you that also with an example. So I'm going to leave it here, and again, we'll pick it up on the next video when we talk about what is a deadlock. Then the next coming video, I'll show you how to utilize the monitoring tools to actually try looking for deadlocks when they occur. And I'll leave it here. So my name is Rafael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.